Hello and good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm speaking, or tonight at my side, I think it's today at his side. I'm speaking to Dr. John Shanahan, and he is a expert in the nuclear industry. He's got a remarkable career. He started in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and worked in Germany, worked in throughout the world. And tonight he's going to give us a little bit of a lecture on how he sees energy, climate change, the modern world, and how that falls into that type of thinking. So, Dr. John, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugo. Um, Everybody that sees this video interview, just a little bit of background. Hugo Kruger and I are both civil engineers. Hugo went and got a diploma or master's degree in nuclear engineering as an add-on, and I don't have that degree, but I have 40 years of experience working with a lot of nuclear people. So I'm sort of caught up with Hugo. And how did we meet? Well, I worked with nuclear physicist Kelvin Kem in South Africa for 15 years. And I asked Dr. Kem for a recommendation of somebody to work with Hugo's background. And Dr. Kem in South Africa recommended Hugo, and Hugo and I have been working very productively for the last 5 years, and it's a wonderful pleasure to know him and to know people in his generation. So thank you, Hugo, for having me on your interview today. Here's a little bit about my background. Um, I've worked for 25 years in nuclear power and environmental cleanup of nuclear facilities. And that work was in the United States, but also in Switzerland, which was an extremely important experience for me. And then after that, there was no more work for me in the nuclear industry. And so I got involved in my own family investment management, which led me to a professional career in that field. And the point of mentioning that is mainly for those that are thinking of investing in energy projects in South Africa. I have a little bit of background in investments and mainly knowing what's a good investment and what's not a good investment. And I can certainly say, after working with the professionals in South Africa since 2010, that I fully think that investment in nuclear energy projects in South Africa is one of the best things that can be done today. And then after that 15 years of investment management, I have up through today 13 years of working for education about energy and climate change and modern living. So that's a little bit of an introduction. And so here's what we're going to talk about today in back and forth conversation with Hugo and myself. We're going to talk about what was done right and what has been done wrong in the last 50 years in the fields of energy and climate change. And we're specifically going to talk what was done right and wrong with countries Canada, China, France, Germany, Russia, South Africa, Switzerland, and the USA. I picked these countries because they all have very interesting stories. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the different energy technologies that you have to choose from. And climate change has uh, stepped into the picture about energy technology. So I'm going to say a few words about that. And that will be really exciting for you, should be. I have a very exciting graph that will enable you to be very comfortable making decisions. And then to wrap it up, uh, all these energies and climate change discussions are only important in how they serve you, the people around the world. And so we'll go into that.
Wow, that's interesting. So, what is that? What is that place around which lake? That's Switzerland? Or am I guessing wrong?
No, it's the picture of the first country on the list, Hugo. And in other words, that's rural Canada. But look at all those spectacular colors. And guess where they come from? They don't come from cows in the meadow or towns of 200 years ago. They come from fossil fuels that enabled all those paints. And the meadows in the background are maintained by farm equipment and not horse-drawn plows. So that's just an introduction of modern Canada, beautiful, but with the support of fossil fuels that made the modern world the last 200 years. Okay, if we go on, Hugo, to the countries. Okay, here are the good and bad stories about Canada. Well, the first thing is that Canadians have a unique nuclear technology, different than the technology for
Mm.
all the other countries in the world. And how is that and why is it? Well, the reason is that all the rest of the nuclear technology requires enriched uranium, and the enrichment process is very expensive and complicated and uh, isn't available all over the world. And in particular, when Canada started their nuclear program in the 1960s, they didn't have access to the American enrichment process. So they put their brains together, extremely good engineers and scientists, and developed a nuclear power technology that can use just ordinary uranium, refined uranium. It doesn't have to be enriched. And uh, what does that mean, by the way? Uranium that comes out of the ground is over 99% a fertile material. It means that if a neutron hits it, it can become a fissile material, and less than 1% is fissile uranium. So all the world enriches the uranium to increase the fissile material from 1% to 4%. And the world uses that nuclear technology. Canada uses natural uranium and bypasses the enrichment process. And uh, it doesn't require the enrichment process. Their plants operate continuously all year round. The rest of the world has to shut down to change the fuel when in a shutdown stage. The Canadian reactors can stay at full power and change their fuel. Canada has excellent engineers, managers, and job training in the nuclear industry. I've worked with all of these people all across Canada. It's been a real pleasure. But unfortunately, the government in the last 10 years or so has fallen for the man made global warming alarmism and switched to full support of wind and solar. So that's very unfortunate because Canada has great nuclear technology, it has great resources, and it has great universities and great engineers. So that's what was done right and wrong in Canada. Now we're going in alphabetical order here. And the next is China. China has been pursuing fossil fuels, nuclear, wind, and solar. They're doing it all. And they're doing what's necessary for the best for their economy, and they're making a lot of progress. I think that the direction of their economy is exemplary for the world. There's a lot of things wrong with every country we are trying to talk about, but and including China. But I think that we all know that China's economy is all around healthiest of everything in the world. And they're developing their own nuclear technologies, their own commercial technologies today, and advanced technologies for tomorrow. They make nuclear power cost effective. It's on schedule and on budget quite a bit. The one thing that's wrong with China as a criticism is that uh, they are developing technologies like electric cars. And the reason they're doing that is not necessarily because electric cars are good, but they simply want to be the best manufacturer of electric cars in the world. And in order to become the best manufacturer of electric cars in the world, they have to show that they're producing the most electric cars. But I have access to a video that shows that the electric cars they are producing to boost their numbers are going directly to empty lots, hundreds and hundreds of cars, brand new, sitting there, never to be sold. So that's a little devious business practices for China. And would you believe it? They are even doing the same for bicycles. This video that I can share with you sometime, it shows brand new bicycles stacked up uh, like spaghetti or something. So there are some things that China could do better, and like we all have things we could do better. But when it comes to developing energy, choosing fossil fuels, as we'll see later, and developing nuclear power, they're doing a very good job. Okay, the next country I would like to talk to you about with you is France. And every one of these countries has done something that is absolutely outstanding, superior to the other countries. Well, what did France do that is so good? Well, the first thing they did was every nuclear site that they developed in the 1970s was developed to have many generations of nuclear power, not just one generation, like has been done everywhere else. And John, what does that mean that they plan for many generations? Well, in order to have many generations, you have to have an operating site and a construction site or a decommissioning site. It's that simple, and the French got it better than anybody else in the world. When
Mm.
you go to their sites, I don't have time to show you a video of it or a picture, but if the first thing every site has is more than one nuclear generating plant, and that process of having more than one means that they can optimize their staff and they can optimize their spare parts and maintenance.
Yeah.
But besides those two to four sites of operating plants they have at every site, they have the same number of empty sites, which will be for the next generation when the first generation is retired. and those extra four will be ready and online before the other four go offline. And when the other four go offline, they become a decommissioning site while the new ones are operating. It's beautiful, simple planning that everybody else missed. And then France has a successful used fuel reprocessing plant where the real ultimate waste can be simply stored in 55-gallon drums and put in cylindrical pipes in the ground about 50 feet deep. It's absolutely safe, and that hazardous waste will become normal rock in 500 years. It's very simple uh, planning. We don't have to have deep underground mining mines, tunnels for American waste that is supposed to be dangerous or and is actually dangerous for 1 million years. The French correct that with their fuel reprocessing, and it's a beautiful thing to see. But everybody has a weakness. And then once again, in the last 15 years or so, the French government has decided they must have 50% wind and solar and cut their nuclear back from 70% to 50% and falling. And to do that, they've swallowed the man made climate change hoax. I just have to change slides on my other computer here. Okay, that covers the first four countries. Over to Hugo.
Yeah, so you say you worked in Russia, South Africa, Switzerland, and US as well, basically. So, um, what are Russians doing then? Because it looks as if they are taking over Asia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's amazing, Hugo. Don't you think that Russia is the one country in the world today that is offering to build power plants in a lot of other countries? It's really amazing that that's happening, and they're doing a very good job at it. So let's look at these countries real quick. What has Russia done right, and what have they done wrong? Well, aside from the Chernobyl accident, which was using a very volatile technology and it was being used incorrectly, Russia has done an outstanding job. They've improved the basic design of the light water reactors, which are all around Europe and in the United States and in Japan. They've improved those designs so that they're simpler. Uh, they have less radiation coming out of the design, and they're reliable, and they can be built in those other countries that they're helping. Then they have 40 years of experience with breeder reactor technology. At the same time that the United States alarmists were shutting down the breeder reactor technology in the United States. Their one problem that I had put my finger on is that they're hostile towards Europe and the United States, and they've invaded Ukraine. So, but the Russian nuclear experts have done a very good job. Now we come to the country that's near and dear to many of you on listening to this, and that's South Africa. I've worked with the experts in South Africa for 13 years. I know their nuclear licensing experts, their economists, their and their nuclear scientists and their nuclear engineers. All of them outstanding. And not one of them has sold his soul to the man made global warming alarmist hoax like have been done in the United States and Europe. South Africa has their own nuclear designs for specific needs going forward. And what are those needs? Well, one of the needs is to have a nuclear power plant right next to a coal mine to provide the power the coal mine needs, so they can do the mining of the coal and use their that wonderful resource, the coal. I think that investment in development of nuclear designs in South Africa is an excellent investment. It's one of the best choices. You don't have a chance to invest in nuclear power plants in Russia or China, and the United States and Europe are tied in their own knots. So, if you're looking for a good investment, I would highly recommend investing in the targeted nuclear power plants that they're developing now. And once again, as many of us know, nuclear and coal are the best energy sources for South Africa. A criticism of the country is that their government could uh, function a little bit better, do better planning. Now, here's a surprise country, Switzerland. We all know that Switzerland has a lot of cows. And at the end of every summer season, the cow that's given the most milk gets to lead the other cows back from the mountain pastures to their winter home in barns and gets a big bouquet of flowers to carry on its neck. And from that milk, they make delicious cheeses and chocolates that are uh, prized all over the world. But what I didn't know until I was invited to go to Switzerland as a nuclear expert, how good they were in building and operating nuclear power plants. Now, what's important about Switzerland? Well, it's a small, very small country. So they don't have the economic incentive to develop nuclear power technology. So they buy the nuclear power technology from the other countries, and in Swiss case, it was all from the United States. But the French had, excuse me, the Swiss had excellent universities, excellent education, excellent engineers, and excellent operating and maintenance people to up, see those plants built, operate them safely and economically, and have fun at the same time. Uh, I lived in the 1980s with my family for 6 years in Switzerland on working on nuclear power plants, and I can attest that Switzerland has what every country needs in order to have nuclear power: good government, good economy, good tax structure. They have excellent transportation in roads and highways, and they are very respectful for the environment. Problem that Switzerland has, like Canada and like most of other Europe, is the media, World Economic Forum, etc., have convinced many of the Swiss people to fear carbon dioxide and to fear nuclear power. I've seen videos where young Swiss people are hiking and they walk into view of a nuclear power plant and one person in the couple asks the other, "That's a nuclear power plant. Is it safe?" I've talked to engineers and scientists in Switzerland who are struggling with the fact that the people, the public, are become fearful of the molecule of life, carbon dioxide. So Switzerland has come to a temporary standstill with nuclear power. It's very unfortunate because I think that Switzerland is the top model country for having nuclear power. Okay, the last country I'm going to talk about is my country, the USA. And I've seen it, and I know people, and hundreds of people that are excellent contributors to operating nuclear power plants, being the engineering staff, and being professors at nuclear engineering universities. I know many experts who contributed to advanced nuclear technology in the 60s and 70s that is being used by other countries today. And those people were outstanding. But here we have a list of problems with the government. The government worked to stop the is working to stop the use of fossil fuels and is opposed to advanced nuclear technologies. I've been involved with leaders in the government that are doing that for the last 40 years. The government is opposed to reprocessing used fuel. They've dragged their feet for 40 years. It's one of the biggest disgraces of the nuclear industry. And finally, our government recommends switching entirely to wind and solar and electric cars. None of that is going to work, and none of it is going to make a better world. What do you think of this graph picture, Hugo?
Well, that's the graph that you're not really allowed to talk about worldwide. Nobody wants to show you how much energy, what percentage of our energy comes from fossil fuels, which I think, I'm not sure what number there is, but it's 70, 80% if I recall.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. All that black area is the percentage of the total use of energy in the world over the period 1965 to 2015 uh, that comes that we need our energy we need, and it all comes from coal, oil, and natural gas. And the absolute bottom one that's blue is hydroelectric. It's dams that were built in the 1930s and are performing very well, but there are no more hydroelectric sites. So hydroelectric's not going to grow. Then the next color just above the blue is nuclear power, and you can see how nuclear power grew in the 70s and early 80s, and it then has stayed constant because once we got to 104 reactors, they stopped building them, and that was okay. But the fact that the government has turned down building nuclear power for the future is not okay. And then the little thin lines you see on top of nuclear power are for wind and solar, and and you can see that up until 2016, uh, wind and solar, despite all the media promotions, is a trivial part of our total energy. Now, this graph is very important because it's not just energy for electricity, it's all of the energy that we need. And same thing applies to South Africa, Switzerland, Europe, Asia, Malaysia, Australia. And So one big problem I personally have in the United States is that there is a fraction of nuclear experts that go along with the man-made global warming alarmism. And I'm going to settle that with one picture for you in just a minute. But there's a fraction of nuclear professionals and nuclear advocates that says that nuclear can be expanded worldwide quickly in 50 years. But what they don't tell you is that that's just for electricity. And this chart in front of you is for all the energy we use. So even if we somehow could get the whole world generating electricity only on nuclear, it would only be a part of this graph, and that we would still need oil, coal, and gas for other things, and in particular, all the byproducts, 6,000 byproducts that uh, make things work here today, our computers, our cell phones, etc. So the nuclear people that are claiming that nuclear can solve climate change problems can't do it because number one, replacing coal with nuclear power will have no effect on the significant climate changes that are going to happen with the coming ice ages and the coming warmer times. So uh, I better get off talking about the United States.
Mm.
This, okay, here's the real story, folks. Fossil fuels created the modern world. That led to the reduction in slavery, big time for manual labor. It cut back on dictatorships because we, the people, had energy from fossil fuels to get a lot of work done, and we didn't have princes in palaces and uh, all other kinds of dictators uh, controlling us. And when fossil fuels came in, it put a lot less pressure on the environment. The in the previous 300 years, the woods in Great Britain disappeared for making ships for the British Navy and for commerce and for home heating and building buildings. With fossil fuels, we could make cement and steel and have asphalt and concrete highways, have steel bridges, have steel buildings, and life got a lot better. The uses of fossil fuels go far beyond generating electricity. They must be used as long as available, but wisely. Does it make sense to have poorly planned mega cities where worldwide there are 1 billion internal combustion cars sitting on clogged highways for short distance commutes of 30 miles or 50 kilometers twice a day? It makes more sense to design cities where people can live closer to work, and when those better designed cities, they can have as much mass transit, electrified mass transit as possible. And the truth about fossil fuels is they're going to be very difficult to replace, and it will be more expensive when we have to do that. But this is going to take centuries to happen. So now we get to energy sources that are being sold by leaders in Europe and the United States and Canada today. Here's here's the facts as I know them. Wind and solar can be used where they work best and serve the people best. What do I mean by that? Well, Take Denmark, for example. It's a very windy country, but it's not as windy as Wyoming, where people from Tibet, when they're studying in universities in Wyoming, they can't stand it because it's too windy and too cold. So Denmark's a good example where if they want to, they can have wind all they want. And it's a small country, so they don't have to run uh, electric lines, transmission lines for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Uh, Wind and solar can be used to generate electricity, pump water like the Netherlands did for centuries, and produce hydrogen from electrolysis if that's going to be the case. Wind and solar are not good for national electric grids in most cases. Wind and solar are disasters in mining for the materials they use. They are also disasters in the disposal uh, of the worn out wind turbines and solar panels. Okay, last energy I'm going to talk about is nuclear power and nuclear technologies. The only future for the world after fossil fuels are gone is with nuclear power. There's there's no using wood or wind or solar because those things can't even manufacture themselves. Nuclear power is the only thing that can provide electricity, which we all depend on so much in the modern world, and it's the only energy source that can contribute to manufacturing synthetic fuels that will be used in agriculture, transportation, planes, boats, and all those things. What kind of nuclear power are we talking about? Well, the future is very bright for all kinds of nuclear power. Micro reactors, 10, 10 megawatts or less, 1 megawatt or less. Small reactors, 300 megawatts or less. And modular reactors where you tie together several small reactors. All of these will be manufactured in factories where you have quality control, and because they're smaller, they're lighter and easy to transport over the highways and over the bridges. It's very difficult planning to transport the big reactors and the big pressure vessels in the large reactors. And one of the many things needed to be corrected in the United States is that, and in nuclear power, is we must get control of the alarmists and we must streamline the licensing department by having in those licensing department people that are qualified to make licensing decisions. Final graph to talk about in this presentation is this one here, and it's something that hasn't been talked about in the among the general public much, but has been talked about among the experts. And in between lie the politicians that go with the public rather than the experts. But energy has become the key to the modern world. And the modern world will disappear much faster by destroying the energy production facilities than by destroying all the cities with bombs. And that doesn't mean blowing up a nuclear power plant. It just means damaging the nuclear power plant so that it will not be producing electricity, sending it out on the grid, for 6 months to a couple of years. And the people that know about this know what I'm talking about, but it is not too difficult to stop electricity being generated in coal fired plants and nuclear power plants, besides blowing the whole power plant up. I can't go into the details, but there is a real problem for the modern world if we don't prepare some of our electric generating plants for war. And that can be done not by um, building the bunker that Hitler went into for the power plant. It can be done much quicker and easier, but our governments prevent our experts from doing that. So
Mm. Yeah, so
that's all I have there, Hugo.
okay, well, thank you very much for that. So, I want to ask you then on that last point about the energy and the water, the social consequences of taking energy away. Because when people come with this green energy transition, and they speak to local communities in Africa, for example, I always get the impression the local communities instinctively understand what's going to happen, but the experts don't really know. And have you ever figured out why that is?
Yeah. What's your point, please?
No, do you have any idea why the experts are so detached from the social consequences of the
Oh,
decisions?
well, that's a whole. You could tie up all the universities in Europe studying that, and or you could come out and make the clear definitions. But basically, just from this point of view of an individual civil engineer, Hugo, is I believe that there are uh, three kinds of people: the large bulk of humanity that is not in a leadership position for countries and is doing trying to do a good job. There are the leaders of countries and global institutions that are trying to do a good job, but in control of most of the final decisions, like at the World Economic Forum and at the United Nations Conference on Parties, climate change conferences annually. There are people that simply want to stop the use of fossil fuels, which is we have seen in that graph are 80% of our energy source. They simply want to stop it, and there are two reasons. They don't like having all the people that have come into existence for the last 200 years. They determined that they want to have a world with a lot less people. That's a pretty sinister thing. Uh, uh, the Russian and the communist dictators and the brutal dictators for 20,000 years before that never got a chance to cause so many people to suffer and die as the people that are trying to take our fossil fuels away. That's the way I see it, and I'm working uh, to oppose that. It's unfortunate that the people that want to have come to fear fossil fuels and carbon dioxide are in my closest circles, and I just work daily for that, and I'm very happy to be gotten to know you and to work with you. Let me show you one last slide here. Whoops, what happened here? I'm sorry. I lost track of my presentation. Just a second, please.
Mm, not an issue.
No, I just uh, here. I hopefully will get it back. Yeah. Now I just have one slide left uh, here that's very important, particularly for my friends in everywhere, but uh, in South Africa as well. And this is a graph that, after a simple uh, explanation, you, all of you, coal miners in South Africa, uh, people in Kenya, Rwanda, and Guinea that I work with, and people that are want a modern world everywhere else, you will be able to make your decision as to whether carbon dioxide is causing catastrophic global warming. This chart shows 600 million years of the history of the Earth. The modern time today is on the right, and you go back 600 million years uh, in the various uh, vertical bars. And the size of the vertical bar is the atmosphere concentration at those different times. And the first thing you notice that from, oh, by the way, what's the magical thing about 600 million years? That's when life as we know it, in all the sea animals, the plants, the age of the dinosaurs, and modern animals and humanity began to live 600 million years ago, and it grew into uh, humanity in the last 100,000 years only, which is way on the right. But life was happening and growing and developing for these 600 million years, and the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere was over 5,000 parts per million in the beginning, and it dropped to 4,000, then to 3,000, and then it dropped down to about 600 parts per million, went back up to about 1,800 parts per million, and then it dropped down again. And the last bar on the right is uh, where we have been for the last uh, 50 million years, and we are at the extreme right. And so for the last 50 million years or more, we've had this so-called constant uh, concentration of about 200, 300 parts per million, and it's grown to 400 parts per million now. So why is this important for all of you? Why is it simple to understand? And why, when you remember this chart, can you make a very good decision about supporting politicians who want to avoid fossil fuels or not supporting them? Well, oh, by the way, why is the carbon dioxide going down in the atmosphere? Eat plants and they all die. That's been going on for 600 million years. And when we die, when the plants die, some of that goes back to as carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Remember, it took it out of the atmosphere, and only some of it goes back, and the rest of it gets put in the earth like fossil fuels, where we're using again, and the carbon dioxide goes back in the atmosphere. But a lot of it gets trapped in other sedimentary rock, and that carbon dioxide is not coming out again. And once the atmospheric carbon dioxide gets down to 150 parts per million, plants suffocate. They can't grow. Plants can't grow, animals and people don't live. And so, what this graph is telling all of you, dear friends in South Africa and everywhere else is over on the left, we're at 300 parts per million, 400 parts per million. We're awfully close to 150 parts per million where life stops. Okay. Now, today, last year, 2022, at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27, John Kerry in the United States, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the President of France, or Prime Minister of France, and the Chancellor of Germany, along with the President of the European Union, all met and formed an opinion that the world must stop using fossil fuels and we must stop putting carbon dioxide in the air. What person does not understand that if we continue uh, with life without fossil fuels, that chart that starts at 5,000 parts per million and drops down to 400 parts per million, and if we get John Kerry and the head of the European Union to to do carbon capture, take it out of the atmosphere, turn it into rock, and if we get them the world to stop using fossil fuels, do you think the world's going to be better or it's going to be a lot worse? I thank you all for your attention here and hope that Hugo and I have given you something to think about. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist or an astrophysicist to understand what Hugo and I are talking about. We're just two guys with civil engineering degrees. Thank you
Mm.
very much.
Yeah.
So,
No, thank you for that. So yeah, maybe can you explain to us that picture over there? Where was that taken?
yeah, yeah. Here, just um, two pictures of ordinary people like Hugo and I have been talking with today, uh, showing them working for uh, world use of plentiful energy, and that's the top picture, and the bottom picture are four musicians and energy scientists in guess where? France, Hugo.
Okay.
You can tell that they're having some wine in the countryside and having a good time. Well, thank you, Hugo, for inviting me to chat with
Mm.
you today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. I've got just sort of a few questions just off the top of my head. Um, when you compared all those countries and you showed their nuclear, and some have coal, some have nuclear, um, the overarching lesson is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it that every country must just find the solution for its own energy needs? Or how would you interpret that?
Well, that's the most important question, Hugo. Um, the question is, how can countries go about getting to where Switzerland is today?
Mm,
Switzerland is a country that has a very uh, uh, reliable economy. It has a very good infrastructure. It has very well educated people, and they're pretty happy. And I know that because my son and his wife and their two girls have lived in Switzerland since 2008, and they've become Swiss citizens. And anyway, the bottom line is Switzerland has so many things going for it, and the question is, how do other countries move in the direction of Switzerland? How does the United States move in the direction of Switzerland? Well, better government, in spite of the fact that we have freedom and democracy, we also have a lot of things that uh, damage what we're doing. Uh, and so you've got countries like, for example, Jordan. Anybody know what's going on in Jordan? Where it is? Well, it's right next to Israel, and it's a pretty arid country, and it doesn't have any fossil fuels. So what is Jordan doing about it? Well, they have a pretty good government, and they're planning to try to make things uh, be better for them 100 years from now. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the government of Jordan instituted a university of technology. It's called the Jordanian University of Science and Technology in Irbid, right on the border with Syria. That's a brand new university built, uh, say, 30, 40 years ago, and they are educating Jordanians and people from as far away as Malaysia and Indonesia to become experts in nuclear science and nuclear engineering for all kinds of applications. That's a very good first step. It's also a very good first step to have a government that supports that. Um, but short of doing that, the real thing that is needed, I'm convinced, is that everybody have access to fossil fuels, not just the gas guzzling countries in Europe and in North America. So the bottom line is all countries move to stronger economies by plentiful fossil fuels so that they can uh, have better economies, better jobs, better standard of living. And with that improvement, switch where possible to nuclear power for electricity at first, and uh, and have the bigger countries switch to nuclear power for producing synthetic fuels as the time arises. I don't see this. I don't see it happening quickly. That graph I showed you about energy, where it was all black, it was staying pretty flat and same. So I think it's to get a change to using more nuclear power is going to take a lot of changes in government and in views of the public, and it's going to take a lot of time. By a lot of time, I think it's going to take several hundred years before a lot of the world is on nuclear power. Could be 300. And then it's going to take a lot of brain power thinking, how do we make synthetic fossil fuels? Right now, for the last 100 years, we've been making synthetic fossil fuels by using coal to make synthetic liquid fuels. And when coal is gone and oil is gone, we won't have them. So we're going to have to find other ways to make synthetic fossil fuels. And what do we mean by synthetic fossil fuels? Well, the person that created the universe said that a hydro decided that person decided the best way to have liquid and gaseous fossil fuels is to have hydrocarbon fossil fuels, not fossil fuels from iron, iodine, etc. So I think we're going to have to find a way to make synthetic hydrocarbon molecules to use as fossil fuels, and that's going to take energy. And the only energy we have to do it is not wind and solar, but nuclear power. So that's the way I see it, Hugo. And the first steps are for the countries that are not using fossil fuels and don't have stable governments and don't have good economies to start using fossil fuels on a regular basis. And just as a closing remark on my part, my colleagues and I are working with people in Guinea, Rwanda, and Kenya to help have more energy from fossil fuels to help them solve real big problems because of droughts and because of bad economies and bad governments. We're working with them. So we're starting at the very bottom, and we'll have more news on that in the next month or so.
Mm.
Once again, many thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for listening. It was really excellent. Thank you, Doctor.